A parking lot, a former luxury hotel that's now an apartment building, a beloved barbecue restaurant, and an office building that has also been converted into apartments. That is what exists today along the north side of Asylum Street in Hartford, Connecticut, between Ann Street and High Street. But a long time ago, in previous centuries, this was once a much busier block with many more buildings and businesses, including both the Bond and Guard hotels, and an edifice erected by the founder of Travelers Insurance. Oh, and this block was also the site of Hartford's very first high school building. Hi, this is History with me, Dan Sterner. Please hit the subscribe button and the like button as we explore this fascinating slice of urban history. In 1847, a modest three-story building opened at the corner of Ann and High Streets, the city's first public high school. The origins of Hartford Public High went back to a grammar school started in 1638, but its evolution from a college preparatory school for boys into a fully public high school for both boys and girls was largely due to the efforts of educational reformer and Hartford resident Henry Barnard, whose advanced ideas about school design shaped the layout of this pioneering school building. This modest structure would serve the students of Hartford for a little over 20 years before a new high school was erected on Hopkins Street in 1869. Over the years, a massive complex would grow between Hopkins and Broad Streets before it was eventually torn down in the early 1960s and a new high school building erected on Forest Street. I'll put a link in the description below to my video that covers all these various homes of Hartford Public High School. The old high school building was quickly replaced in 1871 by a massive new 5-story commercial building called the Foster Block. It was erected by Foster & Company, a wholesale grocery business. The building was renamed the Weldon Block in 1905 after it was acquired by the wholesale and retail liquor distributor Patrick Donahue, who was acquiring substantial real estate in downtown Hartford at the time. He rechristened the building after his wife, Catherine Weldon Donahue. Their son was also named Weldon. The building had a grand mansard roof, but by the mid-20th century, the roof and upper levels of the building were removed, reducing it to 3 stories. The building was demolished in 1982, leaving a parking lot, which remains there today. The Foster Weldon Block's French Second Empire style with mansard roof, which was very fashionable in America in the 1870s, no doubt influenced the architecture of the building just west of it on Asylum. Called the Boardman Block, it was built in 1878 by William Boardman and Sons coffee, tea, and spice dealers. And like the Weldon building, it was 5 stories with a mansard roof. Sadly, this great building, which complemented its neighbor so well, did not exist as long. It was torn down in 1943 for a parking lot. Along this section of Asylum Street, in the late 19th century, there was a mix of much older 1- or 2-story buildings, alternating with more substantial 4- and 5-story buildings. For instance, just west of the Boardman building was a 4-story Italianate block with bracketed cornice, probably erected in the 1860s. Just next to that, though, was a lot occupied by an older 2-story frame building with a later side addition and a warehouse in the rear that was at one time a carriage repository. By about 1910, there was a ladies' and gentlemen's dining and lunchroom occupying the 2-story building. This is where the first section of the Hotel Bond would be built in 1912-13. I go into much more detail about this Hartford landmark in my video about the Bond hotels, which I'll link in the description below. The earliest part of what would become the Bond, Hartford's grandest hotel for decades, was 6 stories tall. It was designed by architect Russell F. Baker and featured a lavish interior, including, of course, a fine dining room. Before erecting the Hotel Bond, owner Harry Bond had already gained fame for his popular downtown restaurant, which was located off Main Street and Central Row. The Bond Hotel's expansion in 1920 to 1921 required the removal of the 5-story Italianate-style building just to the west. In its place rose the hotel's new 12-story addition, designed by Pleasance Pennington and Albert W. Lewis, which was connected to the older section. This addition gave the hotel a grand new lobby and, most famously, a vast ballroom on the top floor that is still a Hartford landmark today, even as the rest of the building has been converted into apartments. The Bond Hotel flourished for decades until it was overshadowed by the Statler Hilton, which opened across the street in 1954. The Bond Hotel Company soon went bankrupt, and the old hotel building was sold to the Catholic Archdiocese of Hartford in 1965. For 30 years, the building was known as DeSales Hall and was home to St. Francis Hospital's School of Nursing. The nearby Statler Hilton was eventually demolished, but the old Bond Hotel building survives today. After a number of years as a hotel again, it more recently became apartments. If you are enjoying this video so far, please hit the subscribe button. Returning to the buildings just east of the Bond Hotel, this photograph, from the flood of 1936, shows the ground floor of the Boardman building on the right. As I mentioned, that building would be torn down in 1943. The Bond Hotel is on the left, and in between them is an older 4-story building that I mentioned earlier. Bond acquired this building in 1924 and made it into the east wing of his hotel. In 1933, with the repeal of Prohibition, Bond remodeled the building's ground floor to become an Old English tap room. This building is now gone, replaced by a simpler 1-story brick addition to the former hotel. Returning to this photograph, which shows Asylum Street before the Bond Hotel was built, there was another 1-story structure that existed just west of the ones I've talked about so far. This building was acquired by Harry Bond in 1919, and it was also demolished to make way for the hotel's 1920-21 addition. Although a modest structure, it was home to a very notable Hartford business, Newton, Robertson and Company, grocers, bakers, and confectioners. The firm started in 1886 as a partnership of J.P. Newton, who had a meat and fish market across the street, and William P. Robertson. Newton retired in 1893, and H. Dickinson became a partner, although the name Newton, Robertson and Company was maintained. Starting as a grocery, the store went through a number of expansions at this location, first doubling its size in 1894 and then expanding again in 1898 when the bakery department was established. Within a few years, the business opened a specialty store on Main Street focused on baked goods and candy. After Bond acquired Newton, Robertson and Company's original location, the store moved a few doors down to the corner of Asylum and Ann Streets. The firm also had a store and restaurant at Main and Church Streets, and its bakery facility was on Hoadley Place. Newton, Robertson and Company, which was incorporated in 1927, the year both Robinson and Dickinson passed away, continued as a well-known bakery for many years, erecting a new facility on Albany Avenue in 1929 and then making another move a decade later to Wethersfield Avenue. That Art Deco-style structure on Wethersfield Avenue survives today. Just west of Newton, Robertson and Company's original home, which as I mentioned was on the site of the Hotel Bond, was another 5-story mid-19th century building, which survives today in a truncated state. It was erected in 1855 for Silas Andrus & Son, a publishing house. At that time, there was not much construction yet of larger buildings on Asylum Street west of Trumbull Street. So Andrus was a pioneer who, as we know, was soon followed by many others who built in this vicinity. Another structure built around the same time just to the west at the corner of High Street was Willis Thrall's Screw Factory. This building also contained other industrial operations, including the bookbindery of Drake, Brown and Company. In 1858, the Thrall building was destroyed in a fire, and the bookbinders, now known as Drake and Parsons, moved next door into the Andrus block. Drake and Parsons, which bound many of Mark Twain's books, was eventually absorbed by the large Hartford printing firm of Case, Lockwood, and Brainerd. By 1919, the Calhoun Press, a commercial printing firm that went back to 1852, was located in the building. But in 1937, the city's building supervisor halted the presses because the building's walls were found to have structural weaknesses. The Calhoun Press moved out, and the building's owner decided to remove its top 3 floors. The building survives today in this reduced state and has had various businesses over the years, but it's most well known as the home of Black-Eyed Sally's Southern Kitchen and Bar, which opened in 1995 and is still in business today. This brings us to the final building on the block, which is a long 6-story brick structure. Now called the Teachers Village Apartments, it was built in the early 1980s on the site of what was one of the city's most architecturally striking buildings, the grand Mansard-roofed French Second Empire-style Batterson block. This building was constructed in 1868-9 on the site of the destroyed Thrall building, which had burned down a decade earlier. It was erected by James G. Batterson, one of Hartford's most influential businessmen, entrepreneurs, and philanthropists. Owner of the New England Granite Works, his company produced innumerable stone monuments as well as grand buildings. He also founded Travelers Insurance, which he led until his death in 1901. The Batterson block occupied a prominent location, across from Bushnell Park and a few doors down from Union Station. In 1906, it was transformed into the Hotel Guard, opened by Walter S. Guard, son of William Guard, who had opened the Hotel Guard in New Haven in 1894. Through the decades, Hartford's Hotel Guard had a number of changes in ownership, and it had to be renovated after a devastating fire in 1943. By 1970, its grandest days were in the past. That January, the hotel's boiler broke down and its sprinkler system froze, forcing the city to evict its many low-income residents. Despite efforts by the Hartford Architecture Conservancy to save the venerable and architecturally significant building, it was demolished in 1973. While the Batterson building and so much more of the history of this section of Asylum Street was demolished, we can at least be grateful that the old Hotel Bond building with its grand ballroom survives today. Do you have any memories of this block in Hartford? Please share them in the comments. And remember to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.